Hello everyone, today we're going to be taking a look at how you can set up the standard Agentforce quoting skills in Salesforce Revenue Cloud that are available as of summer 25. Let's dive in. So there's a couple actions that are available with the Agentforce quoting skill as of summer 25. The actions are create initial quote in Revenue Cloud, which is going to create a quote against an opportunity, and add products from your prompt. You can add more quote lines to an existing quote. You can apply discount to quote line items. You can also create an amendment quote using the agent for assets that are already created. And you can also query quote line items in Revenue Cloud to get a list of quote line for specific products. How can we turn on and set up the Agentforce quoting skills in Revenue Cloud? So a couple steps to go through. So in our environment, nothing is turned on right now. So we'll go through, turn on Einstein, enable Agentforce, create our default agent. Then the summer 25 skills all exist as flows in your environment, but they cannot be used as actions yet. So you're going to need to first clone all the different flows that come out of the box because they're managed. And then we can create the actions for those flows. Finally, we'll create a new topic for Revenue Cloud in our default agent. Then we'll enable the agent and test it out. Let's see what that looks like in Salesforce. So in Salesforce, under setup, the first thing we'll want to do is search for Einstein to turn on Einstein in the environment. So under Einstein, you'll go to Einstein setup. Turn on Einstein is the first option that you've got available there. So we'll go ahead and turn that on. Once that's done, we can refresh. At that point, once that's turned on, you should now be able to see Agentforce within the setup. So you now have access to Agentforce agents, asset, and the testing center. You should also see prompt builder if you need to use prompt builder as well. So that's now available. Also, you'll need to double check that your user has all the required access available under their user. So make sure you've got the permission set licenses and permission sets to use Agentforce. So there are Agentforce permission set licenses at the bottom here. Agentforce default and Agentforce service agent builder if you need to build a service agent. And similarly, under permission sets, make sure you've got access to Agentforce default admin and Agentforce default agent right there. So once you make sure you've got all the access that you require, Einstein is now turned on. Let's go into the next step, which will be turning on Agentforce. So again, let's look for Agentforce under setup. If we go into Agentforce agents, initially Agentforce is not turned on yet. So if you want to turn that on, top right, you'll turn the switch and Agentforce is now on. And we can enable the Agentforce default agent. We'll go from there. If you want to create a net new agent, you could also click the plus sign top right to create a new agent, but we'll simply use the default agent to kick that off. So if you create the default agent, now it's on there, it exists. And if I click through to my agent, I'll get the initial setup screen. Really where we want to add is into the builder to see what currently is available within the Agentforce default agent. So you see we already have general CRM, single record summary available as actions. Might get an error like I'm getting here. This is simply because the agent is still being provisioned in the environment, but either way, we don't need to do any work for now. In this screen, we'll come back later once our actions are created. So as I said, your environment, if you've got Revenue Cloud and the Agentforce quoting skills, should have a couple of flows that are relevant to our use case today. They are going to be the different actions we talked about earlier. So let's reorder this. So you'll see we have add quote line item to quote. We have apply discount to quote line item. Then we should also have create an initial quote on an opportunity and create an amendment quote. So they exist on there. And while they're already active, from my testing so far, you cannot use them to create actions under Agentforce actions. So if you try to go ahead and create those actions, those flows aren't going to be available right now. So what you want to do is simply open up those different flows and save as a new flow. So we'll call this one simply the same name. You can add something to the API name so you don't get a duplicate. So simply create new versions of all those flows, save them, activate them, and then they're going to be available for us to create our Agentforce actions. So we'll simply go through the 4 different actions that we talked through. And again, save as a new flow. Then we'll hit save. We'll accelerate through this, but once this is all done, we're going to be able to go ahead and start to create our actions. So finally, what we've got is create the amendment quote and create the initial quote on opportunity. As you can see, those are all auto launch flows. So the agent is going to be able to use those we go again, simply customize the end of the API name so we don't get any errors. And finally, create an initial quote on the opportunity is the last one that we're going to save. All right, so that was the boring but required step one so that we can start to look through and create our actions. So all our new flows are now active, and we're going to be able to go ahead and create our Agentforce action. So let's go back to setup. Under setup, you should have an option. I'm already searching for agent. You've got an option for Agentforce assets. This is where you want to go, Agentforce assets. And we'll go into actions. Let's give it a second to load. That's going to show us a list of the currently available action in this environment. And as we can see by default, anything to do with quotes is not available yet. So if we search for quote, that's not on there. So we'll need to create those new agent actions based on the flows that we just recreated. So if you search for flows, you can now see the different flows that are available as reference actions for your agent, right? So we've got standard stuff that doesn't have to do with the action that we just created. And finally, the 4 actions: apply discount, add quote line item, create the initial quote, and create the amendment quote. So we'll go with create an initial quote on opportunity. We can leave the label as is, or you can change it if required. Hit next. And then at this point, you're going to want to set up the agent instructions for that specific action. So we've got, I've got predefined text available that I'm simply going to paste in there. I'm going to make it available on the blog post that's going to accompany this video. So if you want to reuse what I've got on there, but really the instructions are going to be what to tell the agent, what the action does, when to use it, what input to use, although you'll also redefine the input to use at the bottom there, and the outputs from your action. But be as specific as possible so the agent knows when to use that action, what to do with the output, what to ask the user if there's any clarifications that need to be asked to the user. So I'll simply paste that text in there that I've got copied. Again, I'll make this available, but to create an initial quote, use the action create initial quote, use these instructions. So as to identify the opportunity, look up the opportunity ID, so on, right? So it's giving the full context to the user, to the agent rather, on how to use this. If the user wants to add any products, also use the add quote line item to quote action for each product that's specified. Loading text, you can input something, so you can get creative there, or boring, whichever direction you want to go. So we'll put something in there. Again, here you can also clarify on the inputs and output sections. So the inputs for your agent action is going to be opportunity ID, price book name, and instructions, and quote name rather, that the user will provide. And finally, the output is going to be either error messages or whether it's a success or not. And finally, the quote ID. So the agent should return a link to the quote when it's created. And you can also add that within the instructions. Now we're thinking about this. So always return a link to the created quote. So you want to make sure that your agent returns a link to the quote that's got created. You don't want the agent to simply say the quote has been created with no potential action by the user. So the ID of the opportunity that's passed into the flow is the opportunity ID. You can also get more specific if you want to make sure you don't get wrong. So the agent shouldn't expect the ID, right? The agent will probably more likely get a name for an opportunity. So it should look for the ID of the opportunity. I believe that's already clarified there. If you are given an opportunity name, look for the opportunity ID. So that's already clarified. No need to change anything here. And we can hit finish. So that's our first action. We'll go ahead and create one more. And we'll go through the different actions that we already created. So create the initial quote. Now add quote line item to quote. Same thing. We'll keep the label as is. Instructions, again, I'll paste into from what I've got. Again, I'll make sure that this is available to you if you want to reuse this. But obviously, you can modify that to your liking and depending on how you want to use the agent. Again, loading text. Add on there, and we've got inputs and outputs again for that agent action as well. So we've got product ID. Obviously, that's going to be the product that the user wants to add. Quantity, so the user should provide a quantity, but if they don't, then the flow uses a default value of 1, which is expected. Which quote to add the products to. Start date if there is a subscription to be added on there. And finally, outputs are going to be similar to the quote creation, error message, and whether it's a success or not. And again, let's hit finish, and we've got our new action created. New agent action, so we'll keep going for our remaining action. So apply discount to quote line item. again, leave that as is. For the apply discount to quote line item action, here's the text that we want to use. Loading text. There we go. And again, inputs and outputs. In this case, you're going to have a quote ID, quote line item ID that the agent should retrieve based on context. And the discount percentage, we can hit finish on that one as well. And again, your actions and your instructions can be customized based on your specific use case, right? Maybe depending on the product type or how you work, you're going to want to be more specific or have specific instructions for some actions, right? So keep that in mind, but I'm keeping this as simple as possible for that example. And finally, our last action is going to be to create the amendment quote. Again, we'll leave the name as is. I'll add our instructions and get a bit extra there. There we go. Loading text, creating amendment quote, and then we've got our amendment date, our asset IDs, which are going to be the input, right? Which assets are you looking to amend, and the quantity change. And then on the right, you've got the amendment quote ID that should be provided to the user at the end, and whether it's a success or not. And finally, hit finish. Now that our actions are created, we are going to want to go back into our Agentforce agent. So if I click through on Agentforce agent, we'll open up our default Agentforce agent. And again, we're going to want to go into the builder. Back in the builder, you see that it's fully provisioned now, so we don't get any error message anymore. We've got our topic, our standard topics, general CRM, single record summary. We don't want to modify those. What we do want to do is we'll create a new topic, and we will create the quote management topic. And again, to be clear here, from my testing so far, the environment does come with a quote management topic, which is where I took the initial version of the instructions for my different actions. The issue with the quote management topic is, first, it cannot be added to your Agentforce, not in the environments I've tested with. So you cannot add it to your agent when you go to new and add a topic. So that's the first issue. And the other one is the actions are also not related to that topic. So we get a couple standard agent actions within that topic, but not the ones that are relevant to us. So we'll simply create a net new topic, and we'll use that standard topic as the baseline for this. So we'll call this quote management. And then from the other tab, you're going to need to define all the classification description, the scope of your topic, the instructions. So really, this is all the input. So the first thing that the agent does when it gets a request is to figure out which topic to use, right? So this is where you want to instruct the agent on where to go and why to use that quote management topic, right? And again, because we have that available on the standard topic, although we cannot add the topic automatically within our agent, we can at least copy the values that are in the classification description, and the scope and all the different fields that we need to fill in do have values in the standard Agentforce topic. So we can use all of those values to create our new agent topic. Obviously, again, that's another place where if you need to modify it, you need to modify it, right? If you need to be more specific, given your use case, be more specific, or if you need to change some of the assumptions that are built into the instructions, make sure you do. All right, so I'll simply take the instructions that were on the templatized agent topic, and we'll add all of those, one more to add on there. And once that's created, again, I'll also share those on the blog post as well. So if you're looking to copy those values, you can go ahead and do that. And that's it. Example user input could be as simple as the user wants to create a quote, right? I want to create a quote for opportunity XYZ with our subscription product, for example, right? And again, that's one more place where you can get as specific as you need to add more and more example input. But given the instructions that are available, that should be enough for our agent to work the way we want it to work now. So now at this point, we want to make sure we add all the actions that we've already created, right? So we want to add quote line item to quote, apply discount to quote line item, and then we have create the amendment quote, create initial quote on an opportunity, which you also want. So these are the new actions that we created. You do want to add a couple more actions to your agent so it can do its job correctly. So let's see, update record, if there's any updates, specific update records like opportunities that might be relevant within our current topic. And then we also want the search action. sorry, not search, but query records. So if the user provides the name of a record, the agent can use that query records action to identify the specific ID and pass the ID into our flow action. We can also add identify object by name and identify record by name. All right, so that should be enough to get going with our agent. So let's hit finish. There we go. So we've got our new topic created. Let's go into our topic. We confirm that we've got all the instructions we need on there. Topic actions are all added. So now is going to be the time to test our new agent. So the standard Agentforce action to create quotes does require at least an opportunity to exist. So it's always going to want to create a quote against an opportunity, even though Revenue Cloud by itself doesn't require an opportunity for a quote. So we'll use our account Intuit and we'll create a new opportunity there. So we'll simply call this Agentforce opportunity, given it's an Agentforce demo. Close date, set to the end of the month. We'll keep this as simple as possible. I simply want an opportunity to exist. Now our opportunity is created. For product, we will use one of the hardware products that we've got available in this environment. So let's go ahead and go back to our builder. And before we activate, we simply can test from this window. So we'll go bottom right and we'll ask the agent to test. Now we're ready to test. Bottom right in the conversation preview, we'll go ahead and paste that in. So create a quote for Intuit under the Agentforce demo opportunity for 5 Think System ST50. We're trying to sell 5 servers to that account on that opportunity. Go ahead and send that request. And as you're in the conversation preview in the builder, you'll see how the agent identifies which topic to use, which action to use. And you can see that it's going through the different prompts. There we go. So we see that it's decided to use the quote management topic and then which action to use, identify the record to figure out which opportunity to use for opportunity for account, the product as well. And then it's creating the initial quote on opportunity and then adding the quote line item to quote. And then the quote was created. We do see in the description there that the quote ID was returned, but we did not get a link. So our instructions weren't clear enough in our topic. So we should aim to clarify that before we activate, because obviously if you're a user and you're leveraging this in the system, you would want to get the link to the quote. But then if we just grab that ID and go look at it, we can see that the quote was created. Our products are on there. The quantity is correct. And we've got this created and calculated in a couple seconds. So if you did need to clarify this, obviously we would go back into our topic label. And then under the scope and the instructions, let's see. So in our instructions for creating our initial quote, bottom there, we could add more specifically, always return the quote ID after creating the quote. So we make sure that that's always the case and the agent always returns. So be again as specific as you need it to be. So I've added this line on there so we can hit save. And now at this point, if you wanted to retest and confirm that it works as expected now, you can always refresh your conversation preview, paste back your request again, and we'll see again the agent think true, available topics, available actions. So we should see our loading instructions pop up there as it's identifying which actions to use. And once it's done, it's going to create the quote, creating all the quotes, right? So that's the loading test that we're adding all the lines again, the loading text that we used. And we can now see that the quote has been created again, but now we do have a link to our quote. So if we open this up in a new tab, we get another quote created under that same opportunity, same product. We did not specify a quote name for our quote. So it did use a standard formulaic quote name in this scenario, but you could also provide that as an input to your agent. And obviously we've got 4 different actions created. This first test tested 2 of them, right? Creating the quote and adding quote lines. We could go against a specific quote and test adding discount to a line. So what we can do at this point, if we want to test it on a given quote, what we could simply do is hit activate top right there. Now our agent is activated. If we head back into our standard interface, just make sure you refresh. And then you should have the Agentforce button top right. So our agent is now showing up in the interface. We can pin the view so you can see it from here. And now against that account, if we go look at a couple things. So we've got assets, so we can test the amendment functionality on there. But let's simply go back to our quote. And let's see if we can add discount to our Think System product against this quote. So let's ask the agent to add 25% discount. All right. So my prompt is add a 25% discount to the Think System ST50 product on the current quote, right? So I don't want to have to specify which quote I'm talking about. The agent should retrieve that from context because it knows what record ID you're currently looking at. Product, obviously, I'm specifying now, but if we had multiple products, we would want to specify which one. In this scenario, there's only one. Let's go ahead and send out that request to our agent. So we see it's looking through possible actions. So it says now that the discount has been successfully applied to our product on the current quote. So let's refresh to confirm that this is true. And if we're coming back to our quote now, once refreshed, list price, 25% discount, and our net unit price. So that's worked as expected. And the latest test we want to do is let's go into our account. We do see it. We have an asset for the security suite. So let's say that we want to process an amendment and add 5 more licenses for that security suite for that account. So our request will be create an amendment quote for security suite on the Intuit account. They want to add 5 licenses. So let's go ahead and send out that request. Again, the agent will look through available options within topics and actions to decide the best one. And it should, there we go, creating amendment quote. All right, so now the amendment quote has been successfully created. You can view it here. So let's simply open that in a new tab. Pop over. Our amendment quote is created as expected. Security suite. We've got the product, list price, quantity as expected there, net unit price, and it's co-terming with our current subscription. And obviously that's created under the correct account as you would expect for the amendment to happen by default. So this was how you can leverage the standard quoting skills for Agentforce in Revenue Cloud as of summer 25. As usual, I hope this was helpful. Please let me know if you've got any questions. Take a moment to subscribe if you like the content. We'll keep it coming as usual. Got a couple other videos on Agentforce in the past, so if you're curious, go back and see those. Thanks, and have a good day.